Welcome to Parenthood Bites, the podcast where we explore life as a parent in tech. I'm your host, Chow, and I have over 15 years of experience in tech, and I'm also currently working as a career coach. I'm the proud mother of 3 incredible boys. In each episode, we have an inspiring guest who will share their remarkable story. You'll find their wisdom and insights both relatable and enriching, because after all, we're all in this parenting journey together. So grab your favorite drink, get cozy, and let's dive into today's episode. Hi everyone, welcome to episode 54 of Parenthood Bites. We're here today with Robert Voyer, who is a senior engineering manager at Tyler Technologies. Hi Robert, how are you today?
Hi, Chow. I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. How's the weather over there? I know it's starting to cool down over here, but it was really hot last week.
Oh, really? Yeah, we definitely have a taste of fall here this week. It was warm and nice until this weekend. In typical Seattle fashion, mid-October, a switch flips and it gets gray and rainy. So it's clear that we're entering that phase, which is a bummer, but par for the course in Seattle.
So is the summer, is it just nice and is it very hot in the summer?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a well-kept secret. Seattle is awesome in the summer. It's like hot and dry and not too hot.
And then suddenly just that switch.
And then, yeah, exactly.
So how many kids do you have and what are their ages?
So I have 2 daughters, a 10-year-old who's in 5th grade and a 7th grader who is 12.
Nice.
So I have one elementary schooler for 1 more year, and then middle schooler is in her 2nd year of middle school.
My youngest is elementary, my middle is in middle school, and then my oldest is in high school.
Oh, you have one in each?
Yeah. So you can imagine drop off and pick up is pretty fun.
That sounds hectic.
Yeah, and then elementary and middle school on Wednesdays they have early release, but then high school they don't.
Here too.
Yeah, so
Okay.
my high schooler, he's always been used to getting off at 1:20 on Wednesdays, and now it's
And now he's got a full day.
yeah, 3:11. I'm like, oh my gosh. To him it feels like an eternity until he gets to come home.
Yeah. Interestingly, we actually had school push back an hour starting last year. So my middle schooler, her school goes through 3:45, which seems like
Oh wow.
a late day.
Yeah, so then what time does she start school?
She starts school at 8:45 or 9.
Oh wow. So does she
Yeah.
get to sleep in a little bit more?
Not really. Sleep is not her strong suit.
Yeah, I feel like for my kids, sometimes they'll want to sleep in, but only when there's school, not on the weekends.
Yeah,
When there's no
right.
school,
Right, of course.
6:00, they're awake.
Playing video games.
Yeah. Sometimes we'll actually check in the game to see if they're online. That's how we know if they're awake or not.
Oh, really? That's so funny.
It's like, oh, okay. Because they know in the morning if they wake up early, they could play for a little bit. And then it's like,
Yeah.
if you wake up earlier, you could play longer. So I think that's their motivation, right?
It makes sense. Yeah, it was not all that different for us when we were
Right.
kids.
Saturday morning cartoons. That was...
Exactly. Cartoons and video games on Saturday mornings.
Yeah. I was trying to tell them about that. And they were like, what? You have to wake up early to watch cartoons? That doesn't make sense.
Only on Saturdays?
Yeah. What?
Yeah.
And then TGIF, right? Friday nights had the shows. And they were like,
Exactly.
what do you mean you can't just watch it?
Whenever you want.
It doesn't make sense.
From beginning to end.
Yeah. So what brought you to a career in tech?
My path into tech was interesting. I started doing web development for a job in college, actually. I worked for the University News Office. And actually, my undergrad degree is in French. And after spending my 3rd year abroad, living in France, I ended up landing this job at a digital humanities project at the University of Chicago, where I did my undergrad. And it was focused on basically digitizing and making searchable all of these old French texts. I got that job because I had some web development skills and because I knew French.
That's so
And from
neat.
there, that kind of propelled me into coding and into natural language processing and machine learning, which sort of became my wheelhouse.
Wow, that's so neat. I love that. Your first job has kind of a combination of both of those
Yeah.
skill sets.
Yeah, pretty weird, but serendipitous. I think it worked out well.
Yeah, that's really awesome. So then how many years were you working in tech when you became a parent?
My first kiddo was born in 2012, and I would say that I really got, if I consider my first job at the university, my first tech job, that would be 1998, so 14 years, I guess. But I would say I didn't really become a real software engineer until early aughts, mid aughts. And then my first industry gig was in the Bay Area before we worked together. Actually, it was in 2000, 2008. So if we consider that my first real foray, then it was about 4 years of tech work before I had my first kid.
Got it. So were you at a tech company when you had your first kid?
Yes, in fact, it was at Wordnik where we worked together.
I actually don't remember this, but what was the parental leave policy there?
Oh, yeah. The parental leave policy, if I remember correctly, was 6 weeks total. I don't know if there was a paternal leave versus maternal leave, if there was any difference there. But for me, it was 6 weeks, and 3 of that was just paid for by the company. And then the second half was subsidized by California's parental leave benefits. And I think, if I recall, there was some pressure in those days not to take your full leave all at once. And so I think it still feels that way. I took 4 weeks consecutive, and then I sprinkled the remaining days throughout the rest of the year so that I could have like a day at home with my baby.
Yeah, it's nice to have the option also to be able
Yeah,
to, spend time with them as they get older.
exactly.
So with your second kid, was the leave comparable, the first one?
It was. Yeah, it was the same.
It was the same. So what was it like going back to work after your leave?
Yeah, good question. So after my first daughter was born, actually, it's funny. I remember the night before my wife went into labor, I remember staying up late working on something, which was a mistake for work, right? And then when you have your first kid, your mindset shifts entirely, right? And I don't really remember the feeling of reintegrating with work. I remember the feeling of like that much time feeling like a long time away from work. And then just, when you come back to work after you've had this sea change in your life, you think about work differently. But yeah, I don't really have a great memory of what it was like sort of in the day-to-day when I came back. I do remember after child number 2 was born that I actually left Wordnik at the end of my leave and then my parental leave and then went to another company. So I started a new company just after child number 2 was born. And that was really interesting. I remember when I first got there, they said, well, what took you so long to start? And I was like, well, I just had a baby.
Yeah.
And it seems like it was still a time where people were like, I mean, we're a startup. We gotta, we need everybody here working hard. And I was like, well, I was working hard at home to raise a baby, get with it.
Right. They don't have that context, right? They're just like, why are you taking such a long break?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I hear you. I think when I was going into labor, I was also like responding to emails and stuff. But then after,
Yeah.
after having the kid, I'm like, what? I don't even remember what I was responding to, what I was doing, what the project was. But then it's like after you have the kid, you're just like, what was I doing? Why was I doing that?
Yeah.
How
Right.
your perspectives, priorities, everything shifts,
Totally
right?
shifts. Yeah.
So I think that leads me into asking if like, how has your work life changed since you became a parent?
I think the importance of work-life balance is definitely much more front of mind for me. Being involved in my kids' lives is very important to me. And so, what does that mean? It means like I try to use my vacation time so I can, whether it's be on vacation with them fully or, maybe if we're not even on vacation, just I stay home a day so I can sort of, do stuff around the house, be with them at the end of the day when they get home from school, hang out with them, go for a run, throw the frisbee.
Just prioritizing the times you spend with them, creating
Absolutely.
those memories.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
things, right?
Yeah, and I think there's something else I would say is that I've gotten involved in coaching sports, like middle school and elementary school sports. And I think probably younger me wouldn't have dared consider like sneaking away, early in the afternoon to coach. But now I find a way to make it work.
Yeah, that's really neat. What sports do they play?
With sports do I coach? Yeah, so I coached one of my kids has played rec soccer, and I coached her rec soccer team. The big one in our family is ultimate frisbee, and so I coached both elementary school and now I'm coaching 7th grade. It's super fun. I love it. It's one of my favorite things.
Wow, that's so cool. And it's also really
Yeah,
awesome to like spend that time with them, right? Because they see you in that
100%.
role and they're like, that's
Yeah,
my dad, that's coaching the team.
yeah, exactly.
That's really awesome. So when they were younger, what did you do for childcare?
So when our first kid was born, we were down in the Bay Area, and both my partner and I were working full time after our leaves, and we ended up doing a nanny share, which was interesting. My partner she would take the bus to work across town. We lived in the inner Richmond in San Francisco, and she worked in the financial district down by the ballpark. And so she would take the bus and she would get off the bus and drop off the baby at the nanny share, go to work, and then have to take the bus home and pick her up. And it was a lot. And then when child number 2 was born, we were here and we hired a nanny who came to our house, I think every day or a few days a week.
Got it. Yeah, that's a lot taking the bus back and forth, but it's like you couldn't work from home, right? Like that's
No, right. Yeah, I forgot that. Yeah, it was a different time.
Yeah, I was talking to someone who has young kids and they were like, I couldn't imagine, what I would have done if I couldn't work from home. I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
you just made it work. You
yeah,
struggled, but you made it work, right?
right, right,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's like,
You make it
do I
work.
have to wake up that much earlier for traffic? Gotta do it. Leave work earlier for
Right.
traffic? Gotta do it. So, did
Yep.
they go to like after school care when, elementary school and stuff like that? Or did you pick them up right after school?
Yeah, good question. Actually, I've been pretty fortunate. My partner, I think, for their younger days, she had some flexibility with her schedule. So she would work like part time and then be around for after school care. And then, they reach a certain age where it's like, can keep working and they take care of themselves or they have after school activities, right?
Yeah, yeah. I will say when my kids like started to like eat on their own and like do things on their own, I was just like, "Oh my gosh, this is great. I can sit here and eat a meal
Liberating.
undisturbed." And yeah, yeah, like
Totally.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
watching TV for half an hour. There's nobody here. Whoa. When they
Yeah.
become more
It's
independent.
funny. Yeah, 100%. But it's also interesting that even, and you probably see this even now when they're 10 and 12, or they still don't seem to understand, like, when I'm working and I'm on a call, and this happens, I think, more to my partner than me because she works downstairs in the dining room and I'm up here isolated. But they don't seem to get it. It's like, guys, I'm working. I'm on a call. You can't come in. You can't come and talk to me in the middle of a call. That's just not how this works.
Right, right. They just see you in front of the computer and they're just like, "Okay, you're just typing. That's it."
Yeah, mom and dad can be bothered when, at my whim.
Yeah, yeah, because what they need it now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I
Right.
see that a lot.
Priority number one.
Right, right. With my youngest, I'm like, hold on. And he's like, yeah, but I have something really small to tell you. But I'm like, yeah, but hold on. you know, they don't, because what they want to tell you, they want to tell you now. Right. So I think
Right.
pandemic was probably the hardest where it was like, I put a sign on the door, put a few signs,
Nice.
close the door. Like, what did you do during pandemic? Because they were both home, right?
Yeah, pandemic was definitely a lot looser. It was hard. It was just like we would take turns, and school was like, I'm sure you saw this too. School was a crapshoot, whether or not you would get dedicated engagement from your teachers and teachers from their students. We actually had an interesting situation. We had my older daughter was part of a little group of 3 kids. We were fortunate enough to be able to hire like a part-time teacher who would come and they would sit outside under this tent throughout even the cold winter months, and they would do like lessons. So they would be sitting there watching their laptops together, and then they would do stuff. It would supplement their schoolwork with some additional help from this tutor. It was an awesome. I mean, it was like a hard time, but it was awesome. But at home, we still had school to do at home, and it just felt as like whichever parent had a moment away from meetings to kind of be present and to help direct the learning was involved. And like you said earlier, we made it work. It was not optimal, but I think looking back, I think we had it a lot easier than a lot of people.
Yeah, it's really nice that you had that tutor outside and because they spent so much time from their screens during that time,
Yeah,
right? Like everything
yeah,
was from their screen. So like they had that balance of outdoors as well.
and with friends. So there was some social time, and a lot of people lacked that during the pandemic.
Definitely that social interaction. I mean, my youngest, he hadn't even gone to school yet. He was in
Yeah,
preschool and then it happened. So he had like preschool on his computer. And you can imagine like a bunch of 4-year-olds just screaming. And so, we had to just take turns going to watch them. And it's like,
yeah,
yes, you're at home, but your foot should not be on the couch. Yes, you're at home, but you should be fully clothed. And like, just
right.
all those things because for them, I think it's hard to distinguish between I'm home,
Yeah,
but I'm still in school.
absolutely. Yeah, it's too much for their young brains to fathom.
Yeah, and then we had to get everyone laptops. Not everyone had laptops in our house and, like, teaching them to use it, right?
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, I forgot about that. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't even have, like, a workstation, so we had to, like, go get them, like, desks and all that, because it was before it's like, "Oh, you just do your homework at the kitchen table or
Right.
whatever," but they couldn't all be there because you would hear the echo and stuff, so
Yeah. Yeah. We actually used, I think, the moment right at the beginning of the pandemic to help get. So let's see, the pandemic started in the spring, and I think that the following summer we basically got the girls' rooms set up so they each had their own room. We painted their walls, got them new desks, which it was like a time investment, a money investment, and ultimately like a nice thing for them, but important, pretty much essential for having a dedicated space for learning.
yeah, I think eventually we would have gotten there, but it forced us to do it right then and there
Yeah.
to
Right.
give them that space and
Yeah.
organize all of that, look into tables, all of that,
Yeah.
desks.
Totally.
So, what has been your biggest struggle or challenge being a parent in tech?
I don't know if you find this. I'll be curious to hear your response. But for me, I think, I don't know if this is like sort of insecurity or imposter syndrome, but I think it's an industry where you have to be learning continuously. And I would even go a step further and say that I think part of my success has come from the fact that I really enjoy it. And so letting it spill over into my personal time so I can put extra time in to get good at it, like that's something I've chosen to do. But oftentimes it feels like, how can you be a high performer in this industry if you don't do that? And so, I see junior folks in their career now and who have families, and I can't say you need to work on this outside of work. That's just not acceptable. That's not reasonable. But also in my own trajectory, it has been a huge part of like growing into, I think, being a high performer. And so that's one thing I would say that's been difficult, is this sort of this feeling of like, I need to do more. I need to do more outside of business hours in order to be successful. You know what I mean? And that's not necessarily specific to our industry, but our industry, I think, demands a lot, and it's constantly changing. There's so much to learn. Does that resonate?
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes working outside of work, not just to be ahead, but also just to catch up and just to
Exactly.
be, at least I felt like sometimes I needed to spend those extra couple of hours just to be on the same level as everyone
Right.
else who can dedicate their entire time, because there are a lot of people who can, or I don't
Yeah.
know how, but they're able to. And so
Yeah.
I always felt like I had to do the extra mile to
Right.
get to where everyone else is. And then if I want to get ahead, I need to
Yeah.
spend
Even more
even
time.
more time.
Right. And how do you do that if you're also trying to sort of be present and participate in the lives of your family?
So how do you do that now?
How do you do it? It's easier now. It's easier now in the sense that, my kids require less time of me, right? It's also, at this point, I get a full night's rest most nights, whereas when they were kids, that wasn't true. When they were young kids, I should say. So how do I do it now? Like for me, it's not, I think I've gotten better at time management since I've been a parent. And so devoting an hour every other night to writing some code, maybe learning a new thing, working on a side project, it's much easier to fit in than it was when they were younger.
That makes a lot of sense, because I think when they're younger, you require a lot more physical help, right? A lot more physical time with them.
Yeah.
Like you said, changing diapers,
Right.
feeding, or like someone gets hurt if you're not watching them all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
They're older, you can say like, hey, now have half an hour, now have an hour. They might come to you, but you can reason
Right.
with them like, hold on, give me
Yeah.
5 minutes. When they're little, you say, give me 5 minutes. They're not gonna know what that means.
Right, exactly. But it's also interesting now, even though they're more independent now, it's also more fun and I think gratifying to be involved. For example, if my middle schooler is working on some math, then I love to help when she needs it. And so, I might close my door so I can go focus on a thing, and then she's knocking on it like, hey, I'm working on this thing. Can you come help me? Of course, let's do it. Let's go.
Yeah. And then you're having those conversations with them. It's like as they grow older, the things you're
Yeah.
working with them on changes, right? And I find it's always so interesting.
Yeah, they're more fun.
It's interesting to hear.
Yeah.
And also, like, I don't know, when I help my kid with math and when I can solve it, he's just like, oh, he's like, you actually know how.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, I do. And so they see you as not just their parent, but like somebody who can actually get things done, figure things out.
Who's capable? Yeah, totally. I will say though, also there are now more and more moments. Like the other night, my seventh grader was asking, she was working on repeating, she was doing some homework on repeating decimals. And I have no memory of learning the tricks for that stuff. And so she's trying to get me to help her, and I was at a loss. I had to go and read the instructions in her workbook to sort of figure out what she was supposed to do. And the fact that there's more of that, I think, is one reason why it gets more interesting. It's like, this is kind of challenging. I don't really remember how to do this. Let's figure it out.
Yeah, but then you're figuring it out together, and that's also
Totally, which is fun.
yeah.
It's a good time together.
You know, my oldest one, he's like reading Of Mice and Men. He's writing an essay, and I'm like, oh my God, let me remember that. It's been so long since I've been in ninth grade, I'm like, okay, let me think through that. And then it's like, okay, we get that done. And then he's like, all right, here's a geometry problem. He's taking geometry, trigonometry, algebra 2. They put it into one course. And so like, he'll come with these random problems, and I'm just like, oh, okay, I'm going to need a minute. Just give me a couple of minutes just to, wrap my head around all of those things, and it's kind of fun too, going down memory lane and remembering like, oh, I do remember how to do this. But I know as his classes get harder, I'm probably gonna remember less and understand less.
Fade out. Yeah.
How has your work life changed since you became a parent?
Aside from the massive perspective shift that happens when you first enter parenthood, I would say, and as my kids have gotten older, sort of figuring out how to integrate things like coaching and, just being present into finding the right work balance is much more of a priority than it was when I was pre-child.
Yeah. So, how do you set those boundaries with work?
I think my company is very family friendly. And so I just let people know. I'm like, hey, guys, I coach on these 2 days. I'll start earlier. I'll be off earlier. If you need something from me, here are the times when you can get a hold of me. Just be upfront about it. At this point, no one has ever said to me, this thing is a problem. And hopefully it continues to go like that.
So, just really being very transparent of like, hey, this is what I need.
Totally. Transparency. Yeah, exactly.
So, we talked about biggest challenge being parent in tech. What would you say would be the biggest benefit or positive from being a parent in tech?
I guess this is a slightly strange analog, but as I've grown into leadership roles, I think oftentimes I sort of borrow ideas, ideas that I might use in parenting into sort of helping folks who report to me grow. So I would say that, but also just the mentality of, just knowing being a parent, I think makes you think about people first. Sorry, that's not the right way to frame it, because I think that you can not have children and not have a family and still be very human centric. But for me, I would say it has helped me be more empathetic towards folks who have families, right? How do I support your growth at this company while also making sure that I support you as a person with serious obligations outside of work?
Yeah. So I know this is something that we're all working on, but like, what do you do for work-life balance? What's your approach?
Yeah, for a while, I'm really into. Do you know Cal Newport and Deep Work?
No.
No, Deep Work is a great book about focus, and I highly recommend it. And for a long time, and I think this was maybe during the pandemic, I was really into this idea of having some kind of ritual at the end of the day for saying, I'm shutting down, like I'm closing my laptop and that's the end of story. I would say I don't do it physically anymore because my laptop's already closed. I do have a dual setup here where I have both my personal computer and my work computer. So as soon as the day ends, and I try to keep it consistent in terms of timing, I switch over to my home machine so that I'm not looking at my work stuff. And I think my level of success with these kinds of rituals and practices ebbs and flows over time. And there are times, for example, when I am the on-call manager, I have to put Teams on my phone, and then I'm actually checking it outside of work. That's probably when I'm at my lowest in terms of my success, in terms of following these practices that I believe in. But then, that my on-call rotation is 2 weeks, and then I'm back to regular life. I delete Teams from my phone, and I get back to ending my day at a certain time, and I try my best just not to look at work communications at all after I've said goodbye.
I love that. So just being really intentional, having your
Precisely.
rituals and the things that
Yeah.
are like, okay, this is the end of my work day. It's almost like back in the day where you leave the office. That's it. You leave your computer there. That's
Yep.
it.
Yeah, those are the right words. Like being intentional about closing up shop and setting an actual boundary between work and home.
Yeah. So I was curious because my kids also, middle school, high school. How do you handle like electronics and stuff with your kids?
This is like the $1 million question for parents.
Yeah.
It's one where it's easy to be judgy. I would say, being a fan of deep work, I do believe strongly that phones are useful tools, but they are also a supreme distraction. And it's not just kids, like every human with a shiny like digital device is prone to distraction and scrolling, and that stuff I believe strongly is not good for us. I have a phone. It's not like I'm saying don't get a phone. I have personally quit social media, however, and I think for my kids, I believe strongly that phones are dangerous. And so we've basically taken the policy, and again, no judgment, everyone's got their own stuff going on. We've taken the policy of no phones till high school, and my middle schooler has a watch, but she's not allowed to use it during school, and that's actually not just our policy, that's school policy. So basically it's just a way of staying in touch with us, and it's gone well. She doesn't abuse it. We also have an old phone at home that kids share that allows them to talk to their friends, and similarly I feel as though that's going pretty well. It's not being abused. So we're sort of figuring this out as we go, but I think my partner and I are pretty aligned that we feel strongly that phones are dangerous. And so really the question is how do we help create a mentality in our kids where they're like, okay, I respect this tool. It can provide a lot of value, a lot of utility to me, but also it's very easy to abuse. I see it all over the place in adults and kids. And so when I'm old enough to accept this, which we're still a couple of years away from. I think we'll have to just monitor it constantly to see how it goes. But yeah, that's been our approach. Does that make sense? And
Yeah.
I'm curious, how does that differ from your
No,
approach?
that makes a lot of sense. And I think, like you said, for every family, it's what works for them.
Yeah,
There's,
that's what works. Yeah,
like you
exactly.
said, people like to be judgy, but it's like, what's the point? It's what works for your family and what you believe
Yeah,
in. And sometimes that changes, like we got our older two phones because we're like, okay, we need them to reach us if we can't reach them in
yeah,
school. Cause there was a time when they needed to be picked up later because something happened and we couldn't reach them. So we're like, okay, let's get them phones. But what we didn't do, which we should have, like they have iPads, but what we do is restrict iPad time. So like we say, hey,
yeah,
only between this time and this time can you play with
yeah,
your iPad, but you have to have your homework done and things. But we didn't set that on the phone because we were just like, okay, well, they know iPad time, then they should know phone time. No. So then we've started to be
didn't
like,
work out. Yeah,
hey, your phone, you should only look at it during this time. And then to your point, there's so many dangerous things that they can get exposed to. So I
yeah,
have that conversation with them a lot to just be like, look, I trust you right now to do the right thing. But if that trust is gone, these privileges are gone. Like it's not a
just go
right,
away.
it's a privilege. And
Right.
so far, I think that's worked, but we've also been adjusting as we go because, again, it's our first time and we're still learning too. And when I was
Yeah,
little, I didn't get a phone, right? There were no phones. No cell phones. I didn't,
yeah,
so it's all very, very new. And then sometimes I hear about like the things they'll say and then the things they're watching. And sometimes I'll just go into their room, just like, okay, what are you watching? What are you playing with? Because they're not going to tell me everything, especially as they get older. I feel like things they tell me is less and less. But I also don't want to be reading their messages and looking through their phones all the time. So I'm just like trying to also have that balance of how much do I ask and how much do I count on them telling me. But as
yeah,
of right now, it's you have phones, but they're for emergencies. And if you absolutely need to use your phone, you absolutely do not use it at school, of course. And their school even sent
yeah,
out a thing like you do not use it at school. I think high school, they're a little bit lenient where you can use it during lunch, but not during class, of course, no other times. But I also just very mindful of when they are on their phones, which at first I thought it's fine. But then, of course, even adults, right? We're always looking at our phones, scrolling and things like
yeah,
that. So it's a shift for us to also figure out how much control we put in place and how much we let them
yeah.
do on their own.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I highly recommend Deep Work. I think it's really interesting. And, it was written a few years ago, and Cal Newport has written more recent stuff. But for me, it has really, I think, it informed my opinion about social media and about phone use. And not, I would say, when I think about restricting screen time, it isn't necessarily, I mean, part of it is, you've probably seen this. Like, I feel like my kids they're just not good people after spending 2 hours in front of a screen. So it's like, let's reduce the amount of like nastiness. And of course, there's the content itself, but also I think the psychological and sort of habits that psychological effect, the impact on your habits from just like doing this, that I feel very strongly about. And so that's, I think, anyway. So yeah, Deep Work, highly recommend it. You should read it. It's a great book.
Yeah, I'll check it out and I'll link it in the show notes too for folks. I'm sure it's on
Oh yeah,
Amazon, right?
absolutely.
For
Yeah,
people to, yeah. And I realize like their attention span too is so
precisely.
yeah,
Yeah,
you know? And so I'm trying to help them just, okay, stay focused. Stay focused for at least half an hour, 1 hour on this thing.
yeah,
You're not looking at your phone. You're not looking at anything else. Just stay focused.
yeah,
Like read for half an hour. Go out to play for half an hour. Do not come back until it's been half,
yeah.
just, it's just unfortunately we can't let them go out into the street to play
The way
like
we did as
when we were
kids. Yeah,
younger. Yeah. Like my mom would just open the garage door and be like, go, come back at 5.
yeah. Same,
And I was gone.
same deal.
Can't do that anymore.
Yeah,
But it's like go in the backyard, go play with your brothers. I'm like, there's a reason there's 3 of you, so you can play with each
right.
other.
Leave us alone and leave the house.
Yeah. Well, I'll play with them too, but like I want them to also just be able to figure out those things on their own because I find that because they have all these things at their fingertips, that
Is lost. Yeah,
creativeness is kind of
yeah,
they don't need to use it. Yeah, they don't need to come up with imaginary games and stuff because
yeah,
there's so many games on there. Whereas when we were little, like how many times did we play hide and seek,
yeah. Hundred
Monopoly,
percent.
all of those other games that yeah. So and like you said earlier, that
Mm-hmm.
social interaction too. Trying to get them to feel more comfortable just
Being with people.
going out, talking to people, making friends, things like that. And I feel like middle school forces that some because they
Yeah,
have like 6 different classes and 6 different teachers. So they're forced to like my kid was like,
hordes of people in the hallway. Yeah,
yeah. My kid was like, they've moved my desk in class. They moved my seat. And I was like, okay. I'm like,
Are you next to some mean kids? No, just kids I don't know. And I don't like that. I'm like, well, you didn't know other kids in the beginning either,
Yeah,
right? You had to get to know them at some point. So kind of forcing them to get used to that.
totally.
But
Get out of their comfort zone.
all that to go back to, we're still working on trying to, evolving how we're viewing them using electronics and trying to get them into the habit of like, it is a tool, but it's not something you should rely on.
Yeah, exactly.
So, what are some things that help you relax or unwind?
Recently, I've had a fun thing, and I don't know that it's always the same, but recently, over the past 6 months, I've been playing piano as a way. And I don't have a ton of time to play piano, and I'm also not that good at the piano, but I've been learning a song over the past 6 months, this Aphex Twin song called April 14th, which has been super fun. It's a favorite of mine, and I just, every day, I go and I sit at the piano for 10 minutes, and I try to play through this difficult song, and it's been fun to make progress and to sort of see my progress with the song. My kids, my partner, are probably sick of hearing it, but for me, it's been really satisfying and relaxing to get into this mode of just chip away at this thing, do it for a little bit, and then move on to the next thing.
It's really awesome. And
Yeah.
before we recorded, you were saying one of your kids also
Yeah.
likes to play piano.
Yeah.
How did you get her
How to
into
get into it?
that?
So my partner, she's very good at the piano, and I would say it wasn't hard for us to sort of, because we have a piano in the house, which like a neighbor gave us their old upright piano, which doesn't look great, but it sounds beautiful. So we've always had it around. And then I think we started piano lessons young. And so my 12-year-old she's actually not doing piano lessons anymore. Over the past few months, she stopped. But yeah, so we started lessons. My partner would sit down with her and do lessons with her. And that sort of evolved into what she does today, which is she's similar to me, that she'll sit down and just like dabble and then maybe try to write her own song and then move on. For me, it's been fun to do less dabbling recently and to actually sit down and learn a song. It's been really rewarding.
That's awesome. And it's
Yeah.
something for you to relax with. So
Exactly.
hopefully for her, if she needs an outlet to relax or
Same
something,
deal,
it's
yeah.
something for her as
Yeah, we'll
well.
see if it ends up being a similar thing for her.
Yeah. I mean, we have a piano at my parents' house because I played growing up. So sometimes when I go over there, I like to just sit there and just play some old songs and
Nice.
stuff. And it is a way for me also to just kind of block out everything else in my mind and just focus on like that song
Yeah.
at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes back to the satisfaction that you get from focusing on one thing.
Yeah, yeah. So what do you struggle with the current ages of 10 and 12?
Yeah, I bet this will resonate with you, having gone through this with your now high schooler. My 12-year-old is like in the, that's like she's getting into peak puberty. She's like going through hormonal changes, and those things at times come out in terms of her behavior. And so figuring out how to moderate my reaction of like, you're being unreasonable and annoying versus like, you're going through a big shift in your own life and body, and I need to be sensitive to that. I'm sure you've experienced this too. It's just like when I think about my kid as like a peer in my household and I'm seeing this crazy behavior and I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah.
But then of course there's, an explanation for it, and it's not off the hook. I think she's a well-adjusted kid, so it's just something you have to roll with and support.
Yeah, I've definitely gone through that. I mean, still with my 12-year-old, I think my 14-year-old, he's kind of out of that. He went through a phase where I was just like, he's not very fun to be around,
Yeah.
Like I would just be like, what do you want for dinner? And then like the reaction, I'm just like, why do you look so mad at me? Like I stole your firstborn or something,
Yeah.
And then I didn't even say anything. And then that would get me upset, And then with that, I kind of adjusted myself. And like you said, kind of putting yourself in their shoes and having that empathy we talked about earlier too, of like, okay, why? What are they going through? Things like that. And
Yeah.
now with the second one, he's going through that phase as well. The older one's gotten out of that phase.
Yeah.
He's more pleasant,
Yeah.
I feel. But the second one, sometimes I'm just like, why do you look so mad?
Yeah.
Nothing happened. You just look so angry. And he's like, I'm not. It's just my face. Okay. And then kind of getting through that and that adjustment. And then I think the little one hasn't gotten to that yet. And I'm just kind of preparing myself for when he gets through that,
Yeah. Well, you'll have gone through it twice. You'll be an expert.
Yeah. And also like sometimes when the older one's like, I don't want to talk to you. I'm like, okay, let me go to the little one. He still wants to talk to me right now. I still have that right now. But eventually,
Yeah, I find I'm trying to sell my kids on whatever it is I want to do, and if one of them's like, no, I'm not interested, I'll just go to the other one and be like, how about you? You want to do this thing with me today? It's funny. It's a little bit selfish, like trying to make my engagement with them on my terms, but pushing my stuff on them helps me be engaged, more. come play my favorite board game with me, or or go for a run, or whatever it is with me.
Yeah, and it's a weird adjustment for us too, because going from whatever you wanted them to do, right, when they were little, they're like, yeah, everything, to
Yeah.
like, no, I'm good. No. And it's like, what? What's
Yeah.
going on? And then like for us, it's kind of a growth as well. And I try to get used to that mindset, like, okay, eventually it'll be back to just the two of us adults at home,
Yeah.
relying on
It's
each
a
other
good
again.
point. Good practice.
Yeah, for sure, as they become more independent.
Right.
So the last thing I like to ask is just what's something you would tell someone who's planning to have kids, or something you wish you knew before you became a parent?
Oh gosh, it's funny. I like to give unsolicited advice at work to people who are about to enter into.
I do too. It's
parenthood.
fine. I think it's a parent thing, right?
Yeah, it totally is. Like some of the advice is specific, like strategies for how to deal with a child who's up in the middle of the night. But I think one thing that has stuck out in my mind that I did not get good advice about was going from one child to two. I don't know if you felt this. I remember feeling like one child was easier than I expected, and then two children was harder than I expected. No one said to me, when you have a second child, it's going to be really hard, and I wish someone had. I don't know. Anyway, so I'm rambling a little bit. I think the thing I would say is probably, it's cliche, which is just that you and I know you're playing the long game with parenthood, and so you have to sort of think about, one, you have to show yourself some grace. You're going to go through different phases just the way that your kids do as they grow. And I guess the other thing I would say is, for me personally, if I'm ever feeling down and frustrated about parenting or about my career, for me, what helps me get through it is like, find a thing to do. If it's picking up an instrument, playing the piano, or doing a project, like just find a thing to do, and it helps me focus, and then I can like bring a little bit more clarity, and I think I can be a little bit more centered in the rest of my interactions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so having something that can help you
focus, recenter yourself,
refresh yourself a little
exactly.
bit, and then you're like, all right, now I can take on
whatever else
it is I need to handle. Yeah, for sure. Because sometimes it's like things just happen and you're just like, oh my God, there's so many things coming at you, right? And it's also our first time doing all of this, because as they're getting older, it's like, okay, now's your first time raising a 12-year-old. Now's your first time raising a 13-year-old. It's always the first time, at least with the older one. And so it's that adjustment and figuring out what you can do to have your own time and still have you.
Exactly. And make sure you can find ways to bring your best self to these challenges that you face, both in your personal life and your professional life, right? In your personal life with your family, I mean.
Yeah, and I definitely hear you of like 2 kids.
Yeah.
And like, you were saying give unsolicited advice, but I think it's the advice that you wish you had heard.
Yeah, right.
It's not you're just saying random things, but it's like, hey, these are going to really help people in the long run, because there have been people that told me certain things and I'm like, oh, okay, it may not apply right now. But later on when it happens, I'm like, oh, that's what they were talking about. Especially my mom, right? She'll tell me things and I'm like, it's okay. And then later I'm like, oh, she was right. That's yeah. I don't know what I was thinking, but like going to 3 was just really a lot too. It's like, people are like, oh, 2, 3, it's about the same because you're having more kids anyway, but it's not the same. It's a lot. And especially with your kids being just 2 years apart. So you're handling 2 young kids at the same time.
Yeah, that was
right.
hard.
So that's a lot of juggling, and it's probably a big blur. I know for me, that's all those years kind of a blur.
Totally a blur.
Yeah. But thank you for chatting with me today. It was really awesome hearing about.
Yeah, it was my pleasure, Chow. It was good to see you again. Good to catch up.
Yeah, it's good to see you. And I think like I haven't heard about like your story with your kids and stuff. So it was really, really cool to hear and hear all the insights you had as well.
Thanks for bringing me on.
Yeah, of course. And I hope you have a great weekend ahead.
Thanks, you too. Bye. Good to see you. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Parenthood Bites. We hope you found our episode informative and entertaining. If you're a parent in the tech world or know someone who is, we'd love to hear from you. Please reach out to us at chow@parenthoodbites.co, and we'll be thrilled to add your experiences to our interviews. That's chow, CHIAO, @parenthoodbites.co. And to our potential sponsors out there, if you're a business or know of one that would like to support and partner with our podcast, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You can also reach us at chow@parenthoodbites.co. Thank you once again for tuning in, and we wish you a fantastic rest of your week. Until next time, Take care and stay curious.